6:30 a.m. on Saturday in Korea.
Wow. Thank you for being here.
No problem.
Here, press F in the chat. How the intrinsic
Okay.
desire to connect has helped us transcend communities. Thank you, Hailey.
No problem. Thank you, guys. So the original idea for this actually came from my very first class at East Texas A&M University. It was with Dr. Attardo, and I loved memes so much that I was so thrilled to actually get to talk about it in a class. And this was our final project, but I was so excited that I took it a little bit further, not too much further, but I tried to. So the whole goal of me talking about Press F in the chat as a meme is that it's more than just something funny that happens on the internet, but it tells us something more about why we choose to communicate in the ways that we do and how that communication represents our desire to connect to each other. And so overall, what I want you guys to come away from this presentation thinking about, or maybe even wanting to learn more and do some research yourself, is how internet memes, especially phenomenon Press F in the chat, demonstrate our desire to connect. And that's something that's really hard to do in digital spaces, as we've seen, especially through COVID and having classes online and that kind of thing. But I think Press F in the chat is a good exemplification of, if we want to connect in authentic ways, here is how and in what specific approaches can we do that, basically. So in order to understand how Press F in the chat got started, I want to give some kind of groundwork for how I'm going to explain this. I think for me that language itself is about connecting with others. Of course, whether that's a positive or negative connection, that's a different discussion for a different day, I think. But I think connection is fundamental. And just as languages have developed unique ways to express complex emotions for connection, digital communities have also created their own tools to fulfill those same needs. And the phenomena of Press F in the chat, which originally started as this video game prompt, I think embodies this expression of empathy that we can see in real life, but then can translate into the digital sphere. I also think it's important to study these kinds of meme phenomenons because it shows how we can maintain these authentic connections, whether we are in real life or whether we are online. So in order to understand Press F in the chat, here's some little background. Press F in the chat originally started from Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. If any of you guys have played that game, you might have seen this. But basically, it was an on-screen prompt that the whole point of it was just to get users to progress through the game. So you would literally press F, the button F, in order to pay respects at this soldier's funeral and then continue through the storyline as normal. And there was actually some originally mixed reactions to it because some people felt it was inappropriately simplistic for this moment of mourning in this game. And so a lot of users, specifically video game users, started using it ironically because they couldn't believe that this moment of mourning in this game had been reduced to this letter F. What then becomes even more ironic is that we can now use this meme and this phrase online as a way to express genuine connection and genuine remorse for people and condolences. And so when we have something like Press F in the chat that goes from something ironic to genuine expressions of sympathy, I think it's worth studying. But how can we study that? I want to start with first a theoretical framework from Dr. Attardo in his book 2023, Humor 2.0, How the Internet Changed Humor. He draws on elements from Richard Dawkins' Selfish Gene in order to define three key mechanisms of mimetic evolution. Those elements are variation, selection, and replication. Variation occurs when individuals create new versions or applications of the meme. In the case of Press F, it was originally, of course, this gaming context that was just a gaming prompt, but each application and each new variation takes it from that simple prompt to something that's more user-friendly and adaptable to that specific context they're using for. Selection happens through community choice. So you don't share every single meme you ever see, just like you don't share every single video or every single news story. You share things that you feel either resonate with you or you feel deserve to be passed on. And so this is where we see the importance of authenticity in digital communication, because I don't know about you guys, I'm not sharing things that I don't resonate with or I don't think represent me as a person. And if variations feel forced or inauthentic, they typically fade away. They normally don't have the same traction that memes such as Press F have. And this genuine need for connection with others actually improves the selection process, because if you can share a meme and connect with others, it's going to give you a little bit of leg up to figure out if that's what you want to do. Replication, it's usually when those chosen versions spread and then they've spread so far that there's a little tweak with each new share. Of course, it doesn't have to be huge, and usually memes actually end up compounding on themselves, but it further enhances the meme's meaning that this resonates with people and then it's applicable for authenticity in different types of spaces. And so it makes it a lot more versatile tool instead of just trying to use, our regular language that we would use in real life. Another way that I would like to analyze this specific meme is that, so having those three key mechanisms, that's all fun and good, right? But unless it connects with what McCulloch in her book, Because the Internet, Understanding New Rules of Language, unless it connects to what she describes as strong and weak ties, then that process usually either stops at the selection stage or it does a little bit of the replication stage and then kind of phases out, basically. So if you want a meme and you want a meme to represent a connection stage and the ability to connect with others, they have to be able to connect to both sections of your ties. Well, what are strong and weak ties? Strong ties are your family, your close friends, your real life connections, the people you usually see very frequently and have deeper bonds with compared to those that you have online. Of course, we all have online friends, but the type of ties that you have in your real life present a much more, as it would be described in Korean, this nuchi, this awareness of your social status, your hierarchy, and how you fit into both of those things. Whereas weak ties, those are usually just your online acquaintances, maybe people you see in a YouTube comment that they say something you agree with, and you're like, ah, yes, I agree with this person. Or loose social media connections. Maybe the person that you've had from middle school that's on your Facebook that every 10 years or so you check in and say, I wonder how they're doing. If a meme can connect with both of those types of ties and it can be relevant with both of those types of ties, it's much more likely to go through those three key mechanisms that I mentioned earlier. And so then we see a meme become much more than just some picture that's being replicated or shared. It can turn into what's called a phatic expression. A phatic expression, it's where a meaning depends much more on context and literal interpretation. You can think of it as saying hello, right? Oh, how are you? It's less about the actual language that you're using and more about the emotion or feeling that you're trying to convey in that context. And the transformation of Press F in the chat from just a video game prompt to even just a funny meme, once it goes into phatic expression mode, it demonstrates how digital communication can develop the same depth and nuance we see in traditional language. And so then we get things like this. My slide's going to pop up. Going from this original context that we saw earlier to something like got an F on a test, realizing the teacher was just trying to pay respects. And so instead of just having this single literal meaning, it develops phatically through this continued use and reinterpretation. And those developed layers of meaning then take it from this simple prompt to an ability to express casual sympathy for minor setbacks, whether it's like it says in the meme, you got an F on a test, whether you dropped your pen and then also missed your bus on the same day. This flexibility of the use of this phrase and of this meme combined with the digital nature of its character, it makes it uniquely suited for online communication. And that's especially important because tone can be really, really difficult to convey online. And it's also difficult to tell when people are being authentic in their tone. And so when we can have these types of layers of authenticity and these very explicit modes of authenticity, we could call it as more of a digital empathy shorthand. It's a good way to just have this toolkit where you can express empathy without having to use as many words or go into as much formality as we might have to in real life. One really unique thing that was cool that when I was going into it a little bit further was checking out these Google Trends data. And what I did is I searched both press F in the United States and press F to pay respects, because those were usually the most frequently associated phrases with this meme. And of course, it shows this spike in popularity from 2014 in November when the game first started. But it also shows an interesting trend to where in 2019, it kind of reaches this peak, but it never really tapers off completely. It becomes almost just a static line. And for me, I think that's important because it doesn't show just this fleeting trend and this dying off. For me, it shows how it connects to both weakened social ties and we can actually sustain usage of things that are more applicable to our desire to connect instead of just something funny and then we let it go. I also think it's important to note that where it says press F and press F to pay respects, it suggests this crystallization of meaning. So users can understand the significance of this phrase without having to have this very, very specific wording of the phrase used. There are actually a lot of other ways to use it too. There's press F in the chat, like I have in my title. There's just press F as you see, but users no longer have to have that specific string of words, and instead it's based more on the empathy that is used to convey it. So if we are going to have digital expressions that transcend their original context, for me, I think there's three kind of key factors for success. First, I think it's emotional resonance. It has to connect and it has to appeal to both weak and strong ties. It can't appeal to one without the other because then it becomes too niche and it's not as memorable for use in either online context or in real life context. I also think then that leans to its adaptability across context because, and I might be um, coming from maybe just a young perspective, a lot of my friends have used this in real life. And if I've said this in my actual real life context, people know what I'm talking about. And so I think that's one of the best parts about this universal emotional resonance of this type of phrase is we can see language not become stagnant, but actually grow in ways that we could never have anticipated to. And so this universal template then it's not just a digital expression, it achieves lasting cultural significance in this regard. So what type of significance of this analysis, and SpongeBob here is on his F, but what can be drawn from this type of discussion? And then how should we think about progressing from here? So first, it exemplifies digital authenticity. I've said that quite a lot, but it just reflects humanity's persistence to find new ways to express authentic emotion and build meaningful connections. Just because we're on the internet doesn't mean we don't want to connect generally, and I think this is a really good example of that. It also shows how linguistic innovation is alive and well, and for uh, there's been a lot of pushback about whether online communication is going to quote unquote ruin our ability to use the language. I think Dr. Attardo's quote from his book actually encapsulates the opposite of this perfectly. He says, linguistic change, the invention of new expressions, and the progressive adjustment of forms and meanings to reflect new realities that the speakers of the language want to talk about is not only normal, but what makes a language a live one. I think Press F in the chat is one of the best examples of this because it shows how living languages take all sorts of journeys and methods to do so. And if we pay attention, we can see that it's the same as it's always been. We want to connect with each other. And so as we continue to navigate an increasingly digital future, because it's coming and it's already here. What I love about that is that we can still see these elements of communication and this desire to connect with each other, and that our authenticity is never going to go away. It's just going to basically through the same meme process that we saw on a previous slide. Our ability to understand each other and to want to understand each other is just fundamental, I think. And I honestly am excited to see what memes represent as we continue to study linguistic change and how those things represent our desire to connect. That's what I got. So if you guys have questions, you please feel free to go ahead and do those. I'm going to stop sharing at this point. And if you need me to share a slide again, I can, but just for the sake of seeing the screen, I'm going to stop.
Questions?
Dr.
Yeah.
Attardo.
Yes. Hi, Hailey.
Hello.
Very nice presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank
But
you.
I'm sorry you turned off the slides because I have a question. But
Oh,
you may be able
yes.
to answer it without. No, you may be able to answer it. There was one
Mhm.
slide where you had
Mhm.
30%, 60%, 90% at the,
Mhm.
you know. So I didn't catch where those percentages came from.
Oh, I am so sorry. I did that more as like a visual representation of compounding those successes together. It wasn't necessarily that those percentages were connected to any specific data. It was more for visual variety. I'm so sorry if that was not clear about that.
Okay, that's okay. Then rule number 17 or so.
Mhm.
Don't put statistics, don't put percentages as visual things, because
Mhm.
I immediately thought she's doing a statistical analysis and I don't understand it.
Mhm.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Now I understand. No problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Anita?
Thank you. Hi, Hailey. I really enjoyed your
Oh,
presentation. I
thank
wondered
you.
if you had a sense or had any numerical, I don't know, values for age range of people who've been using this expression on screen, off
Mhm.
screen. It's something that I'm not
Mhm.
familiar with. I'm much older than you are, I'm sure, but I was just
Mhm.
curious about that.
From what I was seeing, the general age range was, at least for the specific press F, was around 20 to around 35. Now, that data changes depending on what country you're looking at. Like the trends that I was looking at specifically was in the United States. And I think if I expanded my search past the United States to see if it does appear similarly or even appears at all in other countries, I also think that would be an interesting angle to see if those things transcend language itself. But from what I was seeing, it was around 20 to around 35. And that, of course, also that's from Google Trends. So if I looked through a different trends database, I think that would also change as well. But I think that was the average of what I was seeing.
Thank you.
No problem.
In the chat. A question from Jacob.
Hey, Jacob, you said, do you think it matters that the letter is F, that already has little meaning in casual language? Okay. So that's actually a really good question. I think it matters in the sense that it would be easier for people to connect that sense of loss, I think. But I don't think that not having the F would have changed the trend dramatically. So I do think it helped it, but not to the sense that it would have changed the trend completely. But I actually think that's a really interesting question that I could do a comparison with. Like if there's a similar type of phrase and judging by whether those letters actually do have a connection, I think that's a really, one second, I'm going to type that into my phone. I like that question. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think it contributed, but not, but it wouldn't have changed the trajectory, I don't think. Yes, it's a funny letter. I think that's also a reason why users were so upset when well, not upset, but they were just kind of taken back when it was first in the video game, because it's supposed to be this very serious scene where one of your comrades has passed away. And in order to continue with your mission in the war that you're in, you have to then pay respects and keep going. So it's like it's supposed to represent how in war you become so desensitized to those types of instances, and you must keep going no matter what. And that's the original. People were upset about that. You know, why has it been reduced to this? You press this letter and then you keep, and then you just go on your next mission.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So I guess, oops, see, I spoke too soon in the chat.
So do I know how the meme progressed from the original in-game text? F in chat, or press F in the chat. So the general progression was that in video game circles, especially on websites such as The Gamer or through Discord, things like that, people started using that as a general reference, not necessarily to use it as a condolence thing, but just to discuss that actual phrasing and why that phrasing occurred in that game. And then because people discussed how ironic and or insensitive that phrase was used, it became more of people using it as an irony thing. And then when people started using it ironically, they then realized, hey, actually, unfortunately, this was maybe not good in this video game, but it actually works really well in our circles, and we can continue to use it more authentically. And maybe that's how we can do justice to this soldier in this game. I would have to look up more specific details of, especially with the data trends of how when it specifically switched, when it specifically became more popular to use it authentically instead of as a reference. So that's actually a good point. Thank you for asking me that, because I can check on the specificities of that. But yeah, I think it was both a, hey, this is really, I can't believe this has happened, but maybe we can turn it around to a different thing. And now we have a really good, authentic phrase.
Any other questions?